I never thought I'd leave my injured mother alone after an accident. But when I discovered she had cut me out of her will, I ignored her desperate messages and chose myself for the first time in decades. The guilt eats at me, but I know I made the right choice. Growing up, everything seemed normal enough. Mom was always full of energy, bustling around and keeping everything in order. My younger brother and I had the usual sibling relationship. We fought sometimes, but generally got along well. Dad worked hard to provide for us until we lost him when I was in my early 20s. His death left a huge void, but somehow we managed to keep things together. The real trouble started after Mom retired. Instead of enjoying her golden years, she became the most accident-prone person I'd ever known. It was like a dark cloud settled over her the moment she stopped working. Meanwhile, my brother lived his carefree life, occasionally showing up during summer vacations to help with simple tasks like moving furniture or taking Mom's car for service. Then he'd disappear until it suited him to visit again. I was the one dealing with everything else. With a family of my own, kids in school, a demanding career, and a side business to keep us financially stable, I already had my hands full. But whenever something happened to Mom, and things happened a lot, I was the one who had to drop everything and run. The dynamic between Mom and my brother always bothered me. She doted on him, praising him like he was some kind of hero for doing the smallest things. If he hung a picture or fixed a leaky faucet, she'd go on and on about how wonderful he was. Meanwhile, my sacrifices went unnoticed or were just expected. Over the years, Mom's dependency on me only grew. Each hospital visit, each round of extensive care, it all fell on my shoulders. I burned through my paid time off, drained my savings, and left my own family to manage without me. My wife had to pick up all the slack at home while I missed our kids' milestone moments. Through it all, my brother continued his easygoing life, working low-wage jobs and living rent-free with a wealthy relative. The stress was crushing. My career, once a source of pride, became a constant juggling act. One wrong move could send everything tumbling down. My side business, which started as a passion project, turned into a financial necessity. At home, my children needed attention they deserved but weren't getting enough of. I missed school plays, sports events, and countless family dinners because I was rushing to Mom's side. My wife has been incredibly supportive through everything, but I could see the toll it was taking on our relationship. When we did have time together, I was usually too exhausted to really connect. The weight of Mom's constant needs pressed down on me, turning even moments of rest into periods of worry and guilt. Then came the accidents and health crises, one after another. First, Mom slipped on ice and broke her hip in the middle of winter. My brother, between jobs at the time, didn't offer to help because he had a ski trip planned with friends. I spent 2 weeks managing her surgery and recovery, taking unpaid leave that strained her finances even further. Not long after, she got severe pneumonia and was hospitalized for weeks. My brother was working a temporary job at a resort and refused to help, saying he couldn't afford to lose the position. Once again, I was the one coordinating her care, spending sleepless nights at her bedside while my family managed without me hundreds of miles away. The hits kept coming. A head-on car collision on a rainy afternoon had me rushing out of an important meeting to catch the next flight to her side. My brother, living comfortably with his wealthy relative, didn't even visit. He claimed he had commitments he couldn't break, but I knew he just didn't want to deal with the hassle. Then came the cancer diagnosis twice. The first time was breast cancer, caught early, but still requiring surgery and chemotherapy. I was there for every appointment, every tear-filled night. Just when we thought we were in the clear, she was diagnosed with a different type of cancer a year later. More surgeries, more treatments, more sleepless nights for both of us. As if that wasn't enough, she got T-boned at an intersection in another car accident. While the injuries weren't life-threatening, they made her even more dependent on me. Each emergency left its mark, not just on Mom, but on me and my family. Through all these crises, my brother's occasional help became a source of constant frustration. He'd show up during his summer breaks, take Mom out for lunch, or do minor repairs around her house. And she'd shower him with endless praise. "Look how handy he is," she'd gush, showing me a picture he hung or a shelf he fixed. It was maddening. Here I was, sacrificing everything, while he got celebrated for doing the bare minimum. The texts from Mom were equally frustrating. "Your brother hung this lovely picture when he was here last summer," she'd write, attaching a photo of some mediocre artwork. Or, "He took my car in for service, such a help." It felt like she was deliberately rubbing salt in my wounds, highlighting his occasional convenient contributions while ignoring my constant efforts. Whenever I suggested someone else step in to help, the answer was always the same: "But you're the one she wants." Those words became an infuriating mantra that made me feel both irreplaceable and taken for granted. My brother's ability to dodge responsibility without consequences only made things worse. I tried to develop a thick skin, learning to navigate the emotional landmines of our family dynamics while keeping my sanity intact. I loved Mom deeply and wanted to be there for her, but the constant pressure and lack of appreciation were wearing me down. It wasn't just the physical care, it was the emotional labor of always being the one holding everything together. Then came the day that changed everything. While cleaning Mom's cluttered office, I accidentally discovered her will. I wasn't snooping, I was just trying to organize her paperwork. But when I saw her signature on the document, I couldn't help but read it. What I found felt like a punch to the gut. Except for some small amounts left to my kids, she was leaving everything to my brother. The total estate was valued at over $250,000. I sat there, stunned and hurt, trying to make sense of it. After everything I'd done, all the sacrifices I'd made, this was her decision? The next day, I called her with trembling hands. I tried to keep my voice steady as I brought up the topic. "Mom, I found your will while organizing your papers," I began. "I noticed you've left almost everything to my brother." "I don't understand. Can we talk about this?" There was a long pause before she answered, her voice cold. "I don't want to discuss it," she said. "It's my decision, and that's final." "But Mom," I pleaded, my voice breaking, "I've done so much for you. I've been there through every crisis, every emergency. Why would you leave everything to him?" Her response was sharp and dismissive. "He needs it more." End of discussion. Then she hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief, tears streaming down my face. The woman I dedicated so much of my life to, sacrificed countless hours and emotional energy for, had dismissed my concerns in seconds. I tried reaching out again, texts, voicemails, but she ignored every attempt. It felt like she'd built a wall between us. Desperate for answers, I turned to her siblings. My aunt, Mom's older sister, finally agreed to meet me at a local coffee shop. "She's doing it to ensure your brother can retire comfortably," she explained, looking both sympathetic and resigned. "He's always worked low-wage jobs, and she wants to make sure he'll be okay." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But he lives rent-free with a wealthy relative," I argued. "He has no expenses. Meanwhile, I've been struggling to balance everything, sacrificing so much. How is this fair?" My aunt just sighed. "I know it doesn't seem fair, but in your mother's mind, she's doing what she thinks is best for him. She's always worried about him, and she believes this is the way to secure his future." Her words offered no comfort. Instead, they fueled my sense of injustice. My brother, who had lived a carefree life, was being rewarded while my efforts and sacrifices went unrecognized. The emotional impact was devastating. I couldn't sleep, spending nights replaying the conversation with Mom in my mind, feeling the sting of her indifference over and over. At home, everyone could see I was struggling. My wife tried to comfort me, but I was inconsolable. Our kids kept asking why I was so sad, and it broke my heart to see their worried faces. Meanwhile, my brother remained completely oblivious to the chaos his preferential treatment had caused. He'd call occasionally, bragging about his latest adventures or plans, having no idea about the storm brewing inside me. Each conversation felt like another reminder of Mom's betrayal. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my wife turned to me and said, "You need to let this go, for your own sake and for ours. You can't keep carrying this burden." Her words hit home. I realized I was letting Mom's decision consume me, letting it dictate my happiness. But letting go was harder than it sounded. The feeling of being undervalued had dug deep into my soul. I started pulling back from Mom, not out of spite, but to protect myself. The constant pressure and emotional drain were too much to bear. I stopped responding to her guilt-tripping texts and focused on my own family instead. Of course, there was fallout. Mom kept sending messages painting herself as the victim. "I understand you're too busy, but it's so hard to manage without you." Each message reopened wounds that had barely started healing. Then the relatives started calling, wanting to know why I wasn't helping as much anymore. They couldn't understand the emotional toll it had taken on me, the betrayal that had pushed me to this point. I felt alone, caught between my sense of duty to Mom and my need to take care of myself. Eventually, I had to accept that I couldn't change Mom's mind or her will. I had to find peace knowing I'd done my best, even if it went unrecognized. It was a hard lesson in setting boundaries and putting myself first. As months passed, I slowly started feeling more like myself again. I focused on my career, my wife, and our kids, finding joy in moments I'd previously missed. The hurt from Mom's betrayal was still there, but it no longer controlled me. Then came a call that tested everything. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when the hospital's number flashed on my phone. My heart sank. I knew that familiar dread all too well. Mom had fallen down a flight of stairs at home, fracturing her hip and suffering multiple bruises. The nurse explained she needed immediate surgery, clearly expecting me to rush over like I always had. After hanging up, I sat there, my mind racing. Mom had always expected me to drop everything and run to her side, and I'd always complied. But this time felt different. The wounds from discovering her will were still raw, and I just couldn't bear the emotional strain anymore. I called Mom at the hospital. Her voice was weak and pained, but that underlying expectation was still there. "I'm at the hospital, dear. They say I need surgery. Can you come down?" she asked, as if it were a given. My heart pounded as I hesitated. "Mom, I don't think I can come this time," I managed to say. The silence on the other end was deafening. "What do you mean you can't come?" she finally responded. "I need you. I can't manage on my own." Every part of me wanted to give in, to be there for her like always. But the memories of her will and her constant dismissal of my sacrifices fueled my resolve. "Ask my brother to help," I said, my voice trembling. "He should be the one there for you this time." Her response was immediate and defensive. "He can't help with everything, especially not this. He's a man. There are things he just can't do. I need you." Hearing her defend him again, making excuses for his absence, was the final straw. Years of resentment and exhaustion poured out. "Mom, I've been there every time, for every emergency. But I can't keep doing this. I need to think about my own family and my own sanity." Her voice turned icy. "So you're abandoning me in my time of need? After everything I've done for you?" I felt a surge of anger and hurt. "After everything you've done for me? What about everything I've done for you, Mom? It's always been me, never him. And yet you're leaving everything to him in your will. You're securing his future while taking mine for granted." The line went silent before she spoke, her voice cold and distant. "If that's how you feel, then maybe you should stay where you are." I hung up, my hands shaking. The guilt and pain were almost unbearable, but there was also a strange sense of relief. For the first time, I stood up for myself, refusing to let her needs overshadow my own. It was a decision born of frustration and hurt, but also of necessity. My wife stood by me, holding my hand as I struggled with my emotions. "You've done more than enough," she assured me. "It's time for others to step up. You need to take care of yourself and our family." Mom's guilt-tripping text continued. "I understand you're too busy. I'll call my sister if I have to. I just didn't think it would come to this." Each message stung, but I held on to my wife's support and the conviction that I'd made the right choice. In the end, I knew this was a turning point. It was painful, but necessary for reclaiming my life and setting boundaries. Mom would have to learn to rely on others, and my brother would need to step up. It was finally time to put myself and my immediate family first, even if it meant living with the guilt and facing the fallout. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones we need to make the most.